So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today. Just a few things to go over. This webinar will be recorded. Your microphone and camera will be turned off for the duration of the webinar, and to ensure accessibility, live captions will be enabled from the panel. So my name is Carleen Stobie, and I am a Knowledge Translation Specialist here with the National Collaborating Center for Methods and Tools, and I will be your facilitator today with Alana Miller for support. We have a wonderful presentation for you today on applying action-oriented resources to reduce financial strain and promote financial well-being, which will be presented by Dr. Candice Nikiforuk with Anna Bellan and Laura Newendek as her support. This session will provide an overview of 2 action-oriented resources to reduce financial strain and promote long-term financial well-being, developed in an international partnership led by the Center of Health Communities of Public Health, University of Alberta. The resources are meant to support organizations from diverse sectors and all levels of government in designing, implementing, and assessing, evaluating their initiatives related to financial strain and financial well-being. So before we begin, I have our land acknowledgement and a few housekeeping comments. So the NCCMT is hosted at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, which is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee Nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So a few housekeeping things to go over. We recommend using a wired internet connection for the webinar today. For the best results, if possible, please use Google Chrome or Firefox internet browsers. If you do have any technical difficulties, please send a private message to Alana Miller, NCCMT, and we will be able to respond to those requests. If you have any questions for the presenter throughout the webinar, please send them to the Q&A box, and we will make sure to get to those at the end of the webinar. There will also be a few polling questions today in the webinar. When they are open, they will pop up over your screen. And then once you're done, you can hit submit on your response. So after today, the slides and the recording will be posted in about 2 weeks' time. So you can find the recording on our YouTube account and the slides on our SlideShare account. So we will send out a tweet once those are posted, so you can keep an eye out for that. And that will be at NCCMT. So we have our first polling question here. So the questions will be, how many people are watching today's session with you? Have you visited the National Collaborating Center for Methods and Tools or used its resources before? And if yes, how many times have you visited or used NCCMT's resources? So I'll give everyone a moment to sort of answer those questions. Okay. Any final answers? Okay. So the National Collaborating Center for Methods and Tools is one of the 6 national collaborating centers across Canada. We are hosted at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and our goal is to support public health professionals and organizations integrate evidence-informed decision-making into their work. The National Collaborating Centers are funded by Public Health Agency of Canada. We each focus on different public health priority topics. So from the west, there is the National Collaborating Center for Indigenous Health in Prince George, British Columbia, the National Collaborating Center for Environmental Health in Vancouver, British Columbia, the National Collaborating Center for Infectious Disease in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the National Collaborating Center for Public Policy in Montreal, Quebec, and the National Collaborating Centre of Determinants of Health in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. So at the NCCMT, we have products and services to support public health professionals in engaging in evidence-informed decision-making. This includes a registry of methods and tools with over 270 methods and tools, online learning opportunities included in our 13 online learning modules, workshops, Public Health Plus, which is a repository of public health research, video series, including our Understanding Research Evidence videos, which go through concepts of important research in short and easy to understand videos, and also networking and outreach. So without further ado, we have our presenter today, which will be Dr. Candace Nikiforuk. Dr. Candace Nikiforuk works as a professor and scientific director, Center for Health Communities with the School of Public Health, University of Alberta. From 2014 to 2019, she held the National Applied Public Health Chair in Public Policy and Community Environments, which was funded by CIHR in partnership with Public Health Agency of Canada and Alberta Innovates. Candace is a public health scholar with expertise in community environments, health equity, and systems approach to improve population well-being. She currently leads several interdisciplinary cross-sector collaborations on health public policy research. She also has an extensive track record of mobilizing scientific evidence into tools and strategies, which have directly informed practice and policy in municipal and provincial governments, workplace and communities, and national NGO strategic directions. Candace is honored to be included as a mentor of the Royal Society of Canada's College of New Scholars, Artists and Scientists, among other honors for outstanding innovative research and engaged scholarship. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and invite Dr. Candace Nikiforuk to share her.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Carleen, and really pleased to be able to be here today to share our work with everyone here. I'd like to start by just acknowledging that myself, the Center for Healthy Communities, and the University of Alberta are located on Treaty 6 territory. And as an uninvited settler on this land, sharing our acknowledgement with you helps me to reflect on my responsibilities towards the land here and the First Peoples here, and what those responsibilities mean as I carry them through my work and my life. I'm grateful so much for the elders and knowledge keepers and Indigenous communities who continue to share their wisdom with myself and my teams as we work towards reconciliation. So just as I continue with some of my introductory statements, I ask that you all take a moment to reflect on your own land acknowledgements from wherever you are and what they mean for you. So today I'm here to share with all of you some really exciting work that my team and I released in March 2022, which feels like forever ago, but actually wasn't that long ago. This work was developed by my team at the Center for Healthy Communities. Two of those team members are here today, Laura and Anna, and our partners in Australia from the Center for Health Equity, Training and Evaluation. The work is a framework and accompanying guidebook of indicators and strategies to support financial well-being at multiple levels and to prevent financial strain across the very different sectors and jurisdictions who work either directly or indirectly in this area. So as a quick overview of what I'm going to cover, I'm going to start with sharing some background information on the concepts of financial well-being and financial strain. Then I'm going to describe the methodological aspects of the research and explain what the definitions of financial well-being and financial strain are that we ended up using. Then I'm going to introduce the framework and guidebook to all of you and walk through how you might apply these in practice. The presentation should take about 45 minutes, and that should give us lots of time for questions and discussion at the end. So let's get started with a bit of background about this work. To start off, over the last number of years, we've noticed that more and more people worldwide have struggled financially due to the deterioration of social safety nets, the high costs of living, housing crises worldwide, increased levels of impoverishment, and structural unemployment. Then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and these trends accelerated with an accompanying economic recession. And we see those waves sort of over and over. I think, again, I know in Alberta, we're looking to experience one. They're warning us of another one coming anytime. So the impacts of poor financial well-being, we know, have been felt across the socioeconomic spectrum, with disadvantaged or vulnerable groups being those who are most disproportionately affected. So disadvantaged or vulnerable groups include people who experience long-term illness or disability, women, single-parent families, Indigenous peoples, seniors, diverse gender people, and people with high school education or less. People who have greater privileges, such as things like owning property or having a stable income, have also experienced financial strain over the course of time related to life course events, like, for example, when they have children or when they plan to retire, or due to unexpected events like illness or job loss. And these effects are likely to pose more risks to long-term intergenerational economic mobility and health and equity at the individual level. And these things are really important because they have ripple effects on how people respond to economic crises. In Canada, for example, recent data from a 2022 national survey on people's financial circumstances found that 50% of Canadian households reported that the pandemic itself negatively impacted their finances due to reduction in regular paid hours, job loss, and temporary layoffs. 56% of Canadians reported an increase in stress over the past 12 months. 42% of households reported increased debt during the pandemic, and only 42% had funds that could cover 3 months of expenses in that year. So that's in 2022. And this is much lower than pre-pandemic rates, which were 64%. Now, while these are tied to the pandemic, we have to keep in mind that these effects don't just correspond to the pandemic, they continue well past the pandemic. So latest estimates of the Financial Wellbeing Index, also in Canada, indicate poor financial well-being relative to the benchmark in the country. So that's minus 2.8, with every province performing below that benchmark. This financial well-being score is made up of financial knowledge, impacts of a person's financial situation on work productivity, their financial behavior, and their perceived financial situation. So their feeling of whether or not they can make ends meet, for example. So as you can see on your screen, there's a great deal of variability in how the provinces scored across Canada, and with Alberta having the lowest financial well-being score of minus 6.2. And again, that's relative to that benchmark of minus 2.8. All of these factors have had a negative impact on people's health and well-being. Research shows that financial stress impacts physical health in a variety of ways, as well as mental health and social health, all culminating in negative impacts on overall well-being. Importantly, financial strain can lead to poor health, and poor health can lead to financial strain, creating a vicious cycle for people who are experiencing these things. To break this cycle and help reverse this trend of increased financial strain, governments and organizations can intervene on the root causes of financial strain. For us specifically in public health, we can make a much needed contribution to this field of financial well-being, where we've been absent for the most part, with exception for dealing directly with poverty, which is the most acute kind of financial strain. From the perspectives of social determinants of health, health in all policies, and when we think about equity, public health can support the identification of those root causes of financial strain or the root causes of poor financial well-being. And again, we'll talk about why those are different in a moment. And public health can also help to inform actions that could be taken by governments and organizations in concert with one another. Our field can help us move away from band-aid solutions that have focused on individual behavior change associated with saving, borrowing, and spending behaviors. These things are important, but they're only one part of the picture. Instead, public health can help us address the external population level factors that affect people's financial situations. These are things like structural unemployment and systemic racism. Yet there's very little in public health in our literature base that provides guidance for addressing these population level factors relative to specifically financial strain and financial well-being. So, and that's again, beyond a focus specifically on poverty, and I'll speak again about this more in a few minutes. With the important role that public health can play in breaking financial strain, the Centre for Healthy Communities, where I work, and the Centre for Health Equity Training, Research and Evaluation in Australia, led by Evelyn Deleu at the time, partnered to address this gap in public health literature. The purpose of our international research practice partnership was to develop an action-oriented public health framework, as well as an accompanying guidebook of strategies and indicators that could provide governments and organizations with very specific guidance on how to design, deliver, and assess or evaluate their initiatives related to financial strain or financial well-being. Our team received a COVID-19 Rapid Response Grant from CIHR, Canadian Institutes of Health Research, for the work I'm about to share with you today, and we're very grateful for that support. So now let's get in and talk about this research practice collaborative project. As you can see on the screen, we used a variety of different methods to analyze the current evidence on financial strain and financial well-being. Don't worry about trying to understand this whole diagram. I know the font's a bit small. I'm going to be unpacking what we did over the coming slides. Looking first at the top left-hand side of the figure, for this project, we used a series of methods to understand the academic and the practice-based evidence around financial well-being and around financial strain. The first of these methods was a rapid realist review. This means we looked at a large amount of literature over a very short period of time using a what works for whom under what conditions lens. This helped us to keep an eye on equity and intersectionality as well. We started with over 3,500 academic articles and over 6,000 practice-based articles. Through a screening process of these nearly 10,000 articles that we started with, we worked to identify those articles that were most relevant to our topic. In the end, we looked very closely at 39 academic articles and 36 practice-based articles to clearly understand which actions should be taken to guide multi-sectoral action on financial strain and financial well-being, particularly from a public health perspective. The second method we used to understand the evidence and context of that evidence was a policy scan. This was used to systematically capture Canadian and Australian municipal, state, provincial, and territorial, as well as federal policies that were active, amended, or developed to address the impact of COVID-19 specifically on financial strain or financial well-being. After doing an extensive search and narrowing down what was the most relevant, we ended up synthesizing 213 Canadian policies at those different levels and 97 Australian policies. From this work, it was clearly identified that there was a very strong focus on supporting individual and family finances and employment. So for example, in very broad strokes, this would be a very individualized approach, helping people with those skills and behaviors I mentioned earlier, rather than addressing structural factors that impact people's financial well-being. The third method we used was to examine existing financial strain and financial well-being related frameworks available in the literature that we looked at. Through this process, we ended up finding 14 different frameworks. Through a careful review of these existing frameworks, we pulled out their strengths and limitations and then mapped the relationship of those frameworks between social determinants and with financial strain and financial well-being. It's interesting to note that these 14 frameworks came from economic anthropology, happiness research, financial services, consumer research, as well as from business, commerce, and marketing. Only one came from public health. Through the integration of all this information, we developed a draft framework. And while this sounds fairly straightforward, I have to give a huge shout out to Dr. Anna Paula Ballone, who's on our webinar today, who took on this huge task of bringing everything from all these different sources together. It was at this point in our project that we started our integrated knowledge translation approach, where we engaged 14 members of the research team and 16 Canadian Practice Advisory Committee members, as well as 6 stakeholders from Australia. And remember, these folks were all contributing during a time when COVID-19 was at the beginning of the pandemic was at its peak, and there was significant shutdowns, and that was when our favorite word, pivoting, was happening across both countries. These stakeholders represented diverse areas of knowledge and practice expertise from community and professional organizations, as well as from government sectors at all levels. And this included organizations supporting, for example, Black women's entrepreneurship, as well as organizations linked to the financial industry. All stakeholders were invited as they work directly or indirectly with or for population groups experiencing financial strain. We gathered feedback from these stakeholders at multiple stages throughout the project and through various modes. They participated in workshops, online surveys, and in one-on-one meetings with our team. We incorporated their input into the framework very directly to ensure that it was both user-friendly and, more importantly, responsive to the needs of the very different multiple target users that would be using it in different contexts. Once the framework was developed, we transitioned to working with the same groups of stakeholders to develop the guidebook. Similar to the framework development, feedback from the stakeholders was gathered at multiple stages and through various modes. The one additional step that was taken with the guidebook development was an additional critical literature review of resources in both the academic and practice-based literature to really narrow down and identify further targets and strategies that aligned with the different aspects of the framework and that could extend beyond what we found in the Rapid Realist review. And we'll be getting into all of what this means for practice in a couple of moments. While I've briefly described the stakeholders that were involved, this very simple graph gives just a very quick high-level overview of the 36 experts who participated in the project through the different engagement opportunities. As you can see, we had 16 people from the not-for-profit sector, 14 from academia, and 6 from government, and that included provincial and federal government representatives. Before I dive into detail about the framework and guidebook themselves, it's important for me to really be clear about what we mean by financial well-being and financial strain in the context of these tools. There's a lot of related terms around financial well-being, but very little consensus in this space. So for the development of the initial framework, this was something our team had to take the time to critically pause and think about what these words mean, given that they were a central component of our work. Financial well-being is defined as when a person is able to meet expenses and has some money left over, is in control of their finances, and feels financially secure now and into the future. It includes objective measures like income and assets, as well as subjective measures like how people feel about their financial situation. So it can change over time. It's very dynamic. In turn, financial strain is the perception, the feeling of not being able to make ends meet or pay monthly bills. In other words, the experience of financial strain is not the opposite of financial well-being. This is a really critical point. It is part of the overall picture of a person's relative financial well-being. So a feeling of financial strain can sit alongside a person's objective income and assets. So now I'm going to introduce you to the framework and guidebook, which is the compilation of the work that was completed by our research practice collaborative. And again, I want to iterate, the stakeholders were hands-on in this process. On the screen right now, you'll see images from the front covers of the framework and guidebook. These are available online, and we'll share the link with you at the end of the presentation. The framework presents 17 high priority areas for intervention that we named entry points for action. These entry points for action are organized into 5 domains. More about that in a minute. The guidebook then supports the operationalization of the framework. So how do you apply the framework in your own context or according to your mandate? It offers specific information on where to act. So these would be targets. What you could do, these would be strategies related to achieving those targets, and how to assess or evaluate your progress and performance. So that means very specific examples of quantitative or qualitative indicators that could be used to assess your progress along the way or the success of strategies that might be implemented. In all, the guidebook contains 62 targets and 140 evidence-informed strategies corresponding to the 17 entry points for action found in the framework. The reason there's so many is because we recognize in the framework that action on financial strain, action on financial well-being, and action on the root causes of both occurs across many sectors and at many different levels of actions. So the guidebook needed to reflect that. Specifically, the framework aims to contribute to a better understanding of the causes and consequences of financial well-being and financial strain, present entry points for action that are more likely to have a positive, long-lasting effect on people's financial situation, and that provide opportunities to prompt joint or coordinated action across governments and other kinds of organizations. Recognizing that you all likely have not really had a chance to look at the framework yet, we have put a picture of it on the screen for reference. And while I know it will be hard to read on the screen, I will walk you through it as best as I can in this format. So financial well-being promotion and financial strain reduction are at the core of the framework as both the goal and the outcome of initiatives led by governments or organizations. So we want to address financial strain and promote financial well-being. The framework presents 5 domains of initiatives. These are indicated by the 5 different colors in the framework. And these include government at all levels, organizational and political context, socioeconomic and political context. And yes, I did say political context twice. It's in there intentionally. Social cultural circumstances, as well as individual life circumstances. Within each of these 5 domains, there are entry points for action linked to that domain. The entry points describe high impact areas for intervention. So starting at 12 o'clock on the framework, the top purple circles represent the entry points for action within the government at all levels domain. These include improve regulation, oversight, and funding of macroeconomic systems and policies, expand the provision, regulation, and funding of care, education, and transportation services. And when I say care, it's like childcare, healthcare, senior care, for example, prioritize redistribution-based and universal type policies, and finally, provide sustainable funding to programs and services. So as you can see, all of these 4 entry points provide structural actions that can be taken specifically by governments through the governing systems of public and private sectors. Moving on to the organizational and political culture domain, which is identified by the orange circles, the entry points for action here include simplify access to benefits and services, budget for well-being, and assess and measure long-term impacts. These entry points for action target those processes that affect the delivery and sustainability of government, organizational, as well as community actions. It involves the consideration of organizational culture and power dynamics as well. Next, we see the socioeconomic and political culture domain. This includes the entry points of action identified in the lighter orange, yellowish color. Now, these include expanding access to financial services and products, strengthening employment security, enhancing quality education, improving housing security, and promoting neighborhood level advantage. All of these entry points for action encompass changes to the political and cultural landscape that together shape the availability of resources, opportunities for poverty reduction, and possibilities for growth of the middle class, and improvements in the distribution of power at different levels of society. The social and cultural circumstances domain, this one's in green, includes cultural values of financial practices and ways of living, addressing stigma and discrimination, and fostering connection and well-being. This domain is again about the political, and when I say political, I also am talking about power. So the political, community, organizational, and individual actions that together shape or identify social and cultural contexts, hierarchies of power, as well as people's social backgrounds and identities that come together to impact their financial circumstances. The final domain that I'm going to share with you, which is in blue, is life circumstances. And this includes 2 entry points for action, that they should be developed around people's everyday realities, and that actions should consider people's diverse household financial circumstances. In this domain, again, we see political, community, organizational, and individual actions come together to impact people's complex life circumstances, their multiple life roles, and the power relationships that can come together to shape their financial situation, whether that's positively or negatively. The final aspect of the framework diagram that is important for me to highlight for you today is the colored lines that are included throughout the picture. These represent the interconnections between the 5 domains. The lines suggest not only how an action in one domain may have an unintended positive or negative impact on another, but also suggest how initiatives could work together toward a same shared goal. Now I'm going to move on. This slide is one example of what you'll find in the framework. Here you're going to see the domain of social and cultural circumstances. As you can see in the upper left-hand corner, there's an icon that aligns with our framework. This icon will help orientate you with how the domain aligns within the framework. The image itself does not appear in the framework document, but it's going to be helpful for us today. The domain name is then followed by a definition for that domain. Each of the entry points for action are then listed, as you will see in bold on the left-hand side of the table. An example here is foster connection and belonging. Accompanying each of the entry points for action is a definition, which you'll see on the right-hand column of the table. So to help guide users on how to use the framework, we created a series of stages. Organizations and governments are invited to use the framework at any stage of their program, service, or policies, and for a range of purposes like decision-making or advocacy or research. As you'll see in each stage on the screen, the description provides a place to start in the framework, as well as a potential prompt of questions to help you get started of where to go next. It's meant to guide you in the process of designing and implementing your initiatives. I would encourage you to really check out these stages. They're on pages 16 to 17 of the document to explore how you might navigate the framework on your own. Because the framework presents multiple high impact areas for intervention, it is designed to be really flexible and adaptable to different scenarios, different mandates, and different contexts. So for example, if your organization is at the design stage of your initiative, you would start at stage 1, identify the domains, and then accompanying entry points for action that best align with the work you're doing or with your mandate. If your work is already underway, however, you could start at stage 2, which is the redesign stage. From your starting point, whether that's stage 1 or stage 2, you would then go to stage 3, which is implementation. And there you would consider what capacity you have to undertake action for each of the entry points you identify. From there, we would recommend developing partnerships, that's stage 4, to help strengthen your capacity to take action or to coordinate actions with other people working in the same sector. Moving into stage 5, you would work with partners as relevant for you to identify additional entry points for action as you move your initiative forward. Now, while these stages help your organization get started, our team and stakeholders recognize that the framework would be enhanced by a more detailed implementation resource. As such, it was critical for us to create an accompanying document to support that implementation. And for us, from there, we moved to develop the guidebook for the framework. The guidebook specifically aims to provide high-level guidance on design, implementation, or evaluation of initiatives, and to inform, assist, and strengthen initiatives regardless of their focus, regardless of their targeted audiences, and regardless of the level of intervention or organization type doing the work. And again, it's designed to encourage multi-sectoral partnerships. So here's an example of a page from the guidebook. As indicated by the red box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, with each entry point for action, there is an image that aligns with the framework to orientate the user to where the entry point fits within the bigger picture. The entry point for action and the accompanying definition are then provided. As you will see, this is what has carried forward from the framework document. What this guidebook does is take the entry points for action a few steps further to include policy targets, which are identified by the bolded text on the left-hand column of the table, accompanying strategies, which you see in the middle column, and sample indicators, which you see on the right-hand column. The strategies and indicators align with each of the policy targets. And as a reminder, across the guidebook, there's 62 of these policy targets, along with 140 evidence-informed strategies that correspond to the 17 entry points for action found in the framework. Given the depth of information that's provided in the guidebook, we're not going to go through all of the targets and strategies today. We're hoping that this overview, though, gives you a quick snapshot of what you can find in the guidebook and maybe piques your interest to go and explore it further. So here's another example page from the guidebook, which is about the domain life circumstances and the entry point for action called Develop Around People's Everyday Circumstances. As you can see, the number of evidence-based strategies provided for each policy target varies. All of these strategies are based on the evidence and practice-based literature that we reviewed, as well as from the research project that we went through at the beginning of this presentation. The indicators are just a few examples to help get you going on the evaluation of your intervention or to support the brainstorming of new indicators that better align with your organization or with your mandate. To help support use of the guidebook, we've created this flowchart. So let's go through the stages and steps together. The guidebook is not prescriptive. It's not a recipe. Instead, it's meant to be used as an open-ended guide to support decision-making and assessment. So the flowchart content is divided into 3 stages of initiatives and 5 steps. To navigate the flowchart, first, one should identify what stage the organization or government unit is at, whether that's design, implementation, or assessment evaluation. Then you follow that color throughout the flowchart to understand what steps could be implemented to align with this stage. So as an example, if your organization is at the design stage, you would follow the green line throughout the flowchart. In this example, you would first work with other members of your organization who are involved with the initiative to identify the domains that most align with your initiative. From there, you would identify entry points for action that fit with the initiative, and then the scope and mandate of your organization. You would then review the accompanying policy targets for each of the entry points that you selected and identify the policy targets that relate best to your goals. Moving into step 4, as we're following the green line, you would review the evidence-based strategies and select those that are most important and achievable relative to the scope or mandate of the organization. While doing this, you would want to keep in mind the capacity of your organization and adjust the strategies as needed to reflect your context. If relevant and if feasible, you could identify other policy targets or strategies from the same entry point that you could include in your work. Similarly, again, if relevant and appropriate, you could build or strengthen existing partnerships to help support moving the initiative forward. From there, you would move to using the list of indicators that we've provided with each strategy to develop your initiative's assessment or evaluation plan. Given that we've provided only sample indicators in the guidebook, This step could also include adapting what we've provided or choosing new indicators that either come from the literature or developing ones that are very specific to your organization. For partnered initiatives, you may want to consider using common indicators, and this will allow you to understand the collective impact of each partner's efforts. Considering the full spectrum of cross-sectoral and multi-jurisdictional actions related to financial strain and financial well-being, we developed the framework and guidebook with a wide range of users in mind. The resources are intended for policymakers, decision makers, and practitioners in private and not-for-profit organizations, as well as for governments at all levels, from municipal to federal, working on areas that directly or indirectly impact financial strain or financial well-being. This could include, for example, financial coaching programs, employment and training services, childcare supports, or the transportation sector, just to name a few. Researchers can also use these resources as analytical or organizing models for exploring the relationships between the root causes of and the consequences of financial strain or poor financial well-being, and in public health related to health. I want to conclude the presentation today by saying that our two, very innovative, new, there's nothing else like this, practical resources are also available in French. The French versions can be accessed on our website, which is provided on the screen. In addition to additional knowledge sharing activities like our presentation today, with future funding, we hope to concentrate our efforts on validating the applicability of the guidebook in everyday practice in order to further strengthen its relevance and meaningfulness to different user groups. To do that, we will continue to create engagement opportunities for experts and users to provide feedback on the guidebook. We also are looking to create logic models that show how the guidebook can be used very specifically by different actors alone or in coordination with other actors in other sectors. That work can lead to the refinement of the guidebook, and again, in order to further enhance its applicability to a wide range of audiences. In this regard, we really consider the guidebook as a living document that we will revise over time to accommodate the specific needs of organizations or governments who are targeting specific issues, for example, like homelessness or educational attainment, or with specific population groups, and in this case, for example, racialized communities or older folks. This may generate multiple shorter but very specific versions of the guidebook tailored to these groups. We're also in the process of securing funds to support the development of an online version of the framework and guidebook that would take the static content found in the current PDF documents and bring them to life, which would be much easier on our end users. This would help us to support users to navigate through the framework by clicking on relevant domains and entry points for action, rather than flipping through them one by one, allowing them to easily see, identify, and select accompanying policy targets, strategies, and indicators that are most relevant for their work. Something that we have found challenging to do in the PDF document is to show how the many, many linkages that exist across the entry points for action and policy targets all intersect. And this would be much easier to do on an online interactive platforms. So as you can see, we have many future goals for this work and where we'd like to go next. So please continue to watch our website, which we'll provide on the next slide, for updates related to where we're going with the framework and guidebook for action on financial well-being. So at this point, I just would like to thank you all again so much for taking the time to join myself and my team today to learn more about the framework and guidebook. Before I wrap up, again, I'd like to acknowledge that this project received funding from the Canadian Institutes for Health Research as part of a COVID-19 rapid response grant back in 2020. The Centre for Healthy Communities website is shared on the screen, and that's where you can access these resources along. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at the email you see on the screen. And I'd like to open it up to questions now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nikiforuk. That was a fantastic presentation. It was really great to hear more about these resources developed, and we know that this is a really relevant and current issue now. So we really appreciate your presentation to help with that. So now I would invite anyone, if there's any questions or comments, to please put them in the QA tab. There is a question here. So what strategies for intervention can be used at primary care level?
It's a really good question. I'm going to respond, but I'll also call on Anna and Laura to add to whatever I say, because we really did this work as a team and I've been monologuing for 45 minutes. So really, this is, I'm going to give you a very general answer because the framework is really designed to work across all sectors. So with the exception of those entry points for action that are purple, that are really intended for government to tackle, you could target any of the strategies that occur in any of the other entry points for action. So it really depends on what you're doing in your primary care sector, whether that you want to focus on, so I'm going to call on an example from Alberta. For primary care networks in Alberta have done some really innovative network around an initiative called Reducing the Impact of Financial Strain, where the primary care networks themselves are screening for people who are experiencing financial insecurity, financial strain, and incorporating addressing financial strain and financial security as a first step in a healthcare plan. And this is something really innovative. And I would say if you're corresponding that to our framework, it corresponds to strategies that associate with life circumstances. That was the blue part of the framework, as well as it touches on strategies that are under social and cultural circumstances, as well as some that hit on socioeconomic and political context. And then in this case, the primary care network was working very closely with other collaborators in the communities where this initiative was happening. So if you want more information about that initiative in Alberta, please email us at the email I have provided on the screen, and we'll be sure to connect you with those folks so they can share their experiences directly. And we can also share the link to their website that provides videos and documents about those experiences in primary care. And I'll just check to see if Anna or Laura want to add anything here. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Oh, okay, no.
I'll add the link to the chat though, to the Alberta Health Services information that you're referencing.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. We do have another question here. Will there be any financial support for communities in the future to support RIF?
Okay, so RIFs, that's the acronym for the initiative, Reducing the Impact of Financial Strain. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to this question. We were not the funders of that initiative. And so I'm not certain what the future funding of that program looks like. So again, I'd encourage you to reach out to Alberta Health Services who ran that initiative, and they may be able to answer that.
Okay, those are the only active questions. Just gonna kind of leave it open a little bit, see if there's any other questions that anyone has. I'll quickly ask a question. How did you find the development of the framework? Was it difficult to really streamline all the different domains, or how was that whole process?
I feel like I should let Anna answer this question because she was the lead researcher who took on that mammoth task. So Anna, are you okay with me handing it to you?
Sure. So in our team, we have about 10 researchers working full-time on this project, most of them working full-time. I have to give the credit to Laura, who is a very good project manager. So she kept us meeting all the timelines. So we have multiple components. So that was quite hard given the 9-month period that we have to complete this project, and especially considering that we have the IKT approach as well that we were developing, summarizing, synthesizing that all the information captured through different methods, and then going back to the larger team of stakeholders and other academics to give input. So I think part of the challenge was meeting those timelines, but again, we were lucky to have high qualified research staff working, most of them full-time on this project.
Perfect, thank you. So we do have another question here. Are there any case studies included in the guidebook, similar to what you just shared about the Alberta primary care?
No, there's no case studies in the guidebook specifically at this time. That's one of the things that we're working on going forward over the next few years. And again, those, as they become available, will be posted on our website.
Perfect, thank you. So any remaining questions? I'll give everyone a few minutes, and if not, then we'll continue to the end of the presentation. Okay, so I don't see any comments in. So thank you again very much for your presentation today. It was really amazing to hear. We would just like to know, as we sort of wrap up now, for anyone, if you're using EIDM, like evidence-informed decision-making in your practice, or if you need any support with evidence-informed decision-making, please contact us at the nccmt@mcmaster.ca. So we do have one more poll to be answered here today, just some feedback on how you found the webinar. All responses will be kept anonymous, and they really helped us with our improvement of future webinars. So questions are: participating in the webinar increased my knowledge and understanding of evidence-informed decision-making. I will use information from today's webinar in my own practice. And the last question, which are the following statements applied to experience with the webinar? Check all that apply. So I'll give everyone a few minutes to answer those. There's a few more answers coming in, so we'll give everyone a few more minutes. Okay. So if you want to learn more about the webinars at the NCCMT, you can follow this link here. And lastly, I just want to say thank you again for this lovely presentation, and thank you for everyone attending. If you want to hear more information about the NCCMT, you can visit our website. As well, you can contact us at nccmt@mcmaster.ca. So thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely day.